we offline. Are we offline? We offline, right? Okay. How's everybody? We're going to ask that everyone get your food and make it back to your tables. So that we can move. you all about ready? They have mics? You have mics? Are we live in here? Are we live out there? So we're live in here, and we're live out there. I'm Melanie Campbell, President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, convener of the Black Women's Roundtable, co-founder of the NCBCP Thomas W. Dorsch Jr. Institute for Leadership Development, Civic Engagement, Economic Empowerment, and Social Justice. And so for those of you all who are watching, we thank you for either been watching us for the last day and a half or just tuning in. Thank you, Roland Martin Unfiltered, for helping us get this conversation and this conversation out of the room. So thank Roland Martin for me, please. So it is my honor and pleasure and privilege to turn the convening over to our host, Dr. George French Jr. Can you give him a hand? President of Clark Atlanta University and also co-founder of the Thomas W. Dorsch Jr. Institute. And we thank you, Dr. French, for just so much. I'll go all over it again and start crying. But just for being able to help us see a bigger, even bigger vision when Tommy Dorsch was with us. And that, I never forget that meeting we had in your office. And you said, we can do much more. And let's think big, and we did. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm gonna turn this over to you, because there's this awesome fireside chat we're getting ready to have. And so I'm gonna get out of the way of that and have you introduce our powerful brother in the movement leader in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Give Melanie a round of applause, to her board, to all of these board members, participants. We again welcome you to the beautiful campus of Clark Atlanta University. We're going to have a conversation picking up on some of the issues that Dr. King raised earlier, and we're privileged to have with us the distinguished CEO of the United Negro College Fund, Michael Lomax, an individual that this community knows well. He's been a leader in this community for decades, county commission and otherwise. He's led the College Fund to unprecedented heights in fundraising, in advocacy, and other areas. And we're going to ask him to speak to us today on, and we have Getio presented us about 3 questions that would kind of contextualize our conversation. And where we are now, as far as the topic, Melanie, the attack on Black history in public education, the power of HBCUs in achieving higher educational attainment, advancement, economic, political, and social justice for Black America. That's what we are going to discuss today. And the attack on Black history in public education piece, as we well know, is what's really hot. This is the conversation about intersectionality right now, critical race theory. We know what's going on in in Florida, where the governor basically is assuring that DEI and critical race and intersectionality, none of those are taught in the public schools in Florida. Even the 28 presidents of the state colleges recently met to indicate their support for DeSantis and making sure that intersectionality and critical race theory is not discussed. But what we're discussing today is systemic racism. Now, somebody tell me, how can anyone deny systemic racism when you look at those many years that we were enslaved, when you look at Jim Crow, when you look at the Civil Rights Movement, Black Lives Matter, and then let's go all the way back to 1884, November 1884, the Berlin Conference, where it was systematically decided that Europeans were going to divide Africa legally and take what they wanted. And they've done that since then. And now we have the same level of fight in the United States. So we're going to ask Dr. Lomax to speak to any of these issues that have been raised, but I'll frame it with a question. Most HBCUs, Dr. Lomax, first, won't you greet us, and then I'll ask the question.
Thank you. I was hoping you would do that because I did want to, first of all, I want to say to Melanie Campbell how delighted we are to have her back home in Atlanta, Georgia, at Clark Atlanta University, and to have her leading the charge, both obviously with the National Council on Black Civic Engagement, but in partnership now and in residence at the Thomas W. Dortch Jr. Institute here at Clark Atlanta University. Your leadership, your powerful presence here in Atlanta will make a real difference in terms of keeping these important issues that leadership, civic engagement, economic empowerment, and social justice all combined. And and they bring so many other issues. I know we've got people here on sustainability and the environment and making sure that we're good stewards of the earth. So this is a homecoming, and I'm delighted to be part of. I'm not officially, but I'm still welcoming you back. If I was still on the Fulton County Commission, I'd be giving you an honorary citizenship. I'd be giving you a tax bill, and I'd be saying, just come on home, but I don't do that anymore. But I still feel like it's always a good thing when you're down south to say welcome, and we welcome you. And well, we also say welcome to Dr. French. He's kind of a newcomer here to Atlanta. Now, those of us who have had the opportunity to work with him during his decades in Birmingham, Jefferson County, Alabama, know of the great work that he's done in Alabama at Miles College. And let's give him a hand. Come on now. And and Atlanta's a movement city, but you don't get much more movement city than Birmingham. And we on Student Movement Boulevard here. I was at Student Movement Boulevard here, but Student Movement Boulevard, it goes all the way over there to Jefferson County and to Birmingham, and it really goes all the way over there to Bessemer, where Miles College is. Well, wait a minute. Well, is it Fairfield, Bessemer? Come on now, Well, look, I know that they are, although it's not just in proper Birmingham. All right, I've been there. In Alabama. But wait a minute, let me finish saying what I'm saying, because what I'm going to say is that, we don't give enough shout out to the student movement in Birmingham. That's right. We don't talk about, shutting down those stores in downtown Birmingham. But there's a wonderful film. There's a wonderful film about the student movement in Birmingham, which I saw on Maryland Public Television living in D.C. So I think we need to get that film. Now, maybe they won't let you show it on Georgia Public Television, but I'll bet you they let you show it on the Atlanta Public Schools Public Television station. Great film about the student movement there. Stand. Is it Stand is the name of the, wonderful film. And then, now I'm glad to be introduced, but I've been living in Atlanta since 1964, when I came here to go to Morehouse College. And they didn't have all these fences and walls between one campus and the other. And you kind of didn't know unless you'd been given a map when you had stepped off of the Morehouse campus and you were on the then Atlanta University campus, or you crossed the street and you were on the Clark College campus, or you took a left down what was it then? It was Chestnut Street, and got over there to Beckwith and went down Beckwith, and you were then back on Atlanta University, and then you crossed on over and you were on the Morris Brown campus, but you had to cross over the ITC campus to get to the Morris Brown campus. Yeah, so I mean, you know, so I'm just glad we're all in the Atlanta University Center again. We didn't have a Morehouse Medical School back then. But what we did have was a whole bunch of wonderful students committed to civic engagement, and faculty and great presidents leading those institutions. So I want to mention, so you know, we're going to talk a little bit about erasing Black history and intersectionality and all of these issues that, you know, sometimes you got to have a PhD to quite understand. But I just want to talk about two events that came to my mind today as I came onto this campus. The first was in about 1965 or 66, and there was going to be a debate between Stokely Carmichael. You all heard of Stokely Carmichael? Of SNCC, and a member of the faculty of Morehouse College, what was Reverend Williams' name? He was the pastor of the Friendship Baptist Church. Sam Williams. And he was in the, I see somebody applauding down there. They must have recognized the name, or they're just trying to get some attention. And, but Sam Williams was the pastor of Friendship Baptist Church. And he was a professor at and he was going to debate Stokely Carmichael on what? Black power. And they needed some place for that debate to take place. And they were going to initially have it, Dr. French, in Sale Hall Chapel. But it wasn't big enough. So they had to move it over to Davidge Auditorium on the Clark College campus. And I remember it was standing room only. And, you know, Dr. Williams had the education and the academic credentials. But Stokely Carmichael took him to school that evening and taught him Dr. Williams was courageous to do that, but it was a suicide mission. To debate Stokely Carmichael, who did not play by the rules, and to debate him on the subject of Black power. Now, this was a time when we were still, you know, weren't sure whether we were Negroes, African Americans, or Black. But Black was steadily creeping up on Negro, and that was one of the great moments of my educational experience as a student at Morehouse College. But to see two Black men with different points of view, and you know, we do have different points of view in the Black community, respectfully debating one another about an important issue of our time. And yes, I would say Black Power won. Stokely Carmichael was the victor, but the real winners were the people in the audience, who got to hear people from our community debating an important issue that would define the future. Fast forward to April of 1968, just weeks before I was about to graduate from Morehouse College, and the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., father of Bernice and Yoki and Martin and Dexter, husband of Coretta, son of Martin Luther King Sr. and I keep wanting to say Bunch, but I don't think I have the right to say that about Mrs. King, because that was what she was known as affectionately by her family. And I remember when that assassination occurred in the early evening, and the news came over the television and said that Dr. King had been assassinated in Memphis. Some of you are too young. Others of you don't want to admit that you do remember quite well what happened. And I remember that really put our community on edge. I was driving up here to the campus this afternoon, and right there at the corner of Lowry and, what is that? That's Fair, Stirrup Fair. They've just leveled a little building. That was a store, a grocery store owned by a Jewish immigrant that was burned that evening. Anger over the death of Dr. King, and all across the country. There wasn't much of it here in Atlanta. That was one of the examples of the anger, the frustration. But all across the country, Washington, D.C., Detroit, our cities were burning. Yet right here in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. King's earthly remains were brought back to this community, to this university community. He lay in state on the Spelman College campus where his mother had attended. Open casket, thousands of people lined up all the way down Student Movement Boulevard off of the Spelman campus, quietly waiting all night long to go by and pay their respects. And one of the things the students did was we held a silent march, and we convened, this used to be Yates and Milton drugstore, right here where we are today. This was the hangout, this was the corner. People hung out on the corner. People got their degrees on the corner. Samuel L. Jackson, he owned that corner for quite some time. Students convened and we convened, and I remember the march being right here between this building and Dabbage. We were all convening students, silent march through our community down to Hunter Street, now Martin Luther King, up to the state capitol, and silently marched around that state capitol and back to this campus to express with our silence and our ability to demonstrate in Atlanta, Georgia, our sense of the historic moment that we were in. And I remember not only that march, but I remember going over to Sisters Chapel and looking down into that casket and seeing the earthly remains of someone who had given his life so that we might have a better life, so that I might have a better life. And it was at that point that I said, whatever I do with my life, it can't just be about me. It's got to be to make a difference in the world in which we live. The one thing students at black colleges are taught is that we all have an obligation, a role, a responsibility, and the personal power to make a difference in the world. And so this is all bringing me back to being here today. That's why I think it's so important for the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation and the Thomas Dorch Institute to be on this university campus and acknowledging in that we all have a responsibility beyond the gates of the campus. And the gates of the campus have to be wide open to the community. And that's what I think is going to be happening under the leadership of Dr. George French, because that's what he has always done. And we're going to have to stand by him, stand with him, and support him as he brings the world to Clark Atlanta University and Clark Atlanta University back out into the world. So let's give him a big hand, and that is my opening remark.
Thank you, President Lomax. And so the inaugural meeting was on yesterday, and we made it very clear what the mission was. What Dr. Lomax just contextualized for us even strengthens why we're here. We're here because it's time for think tank time. It's time that we develop a serious think tank. When I was speaking with the commissioner from Jefferson County, my friend Sheila Tyson, we were talking about the fact that we have to engage data analytics now. When we go back to past campaigns, including the presidential campaign, and no one could really figure out what was going on, it's because he engaged data analytics, okay? It's time out for just saying, okay, we're gonna have a captain of this block, and we're gonna know before you make a decision about running for state office, local office, national office. There are data that should be researched that would indicate what percentage of any district we need. We're not just going holistically saying we're going to win. No, we're going to have to engage data analytics. We need you all. We need you from Georgia, from Florida, from Alabama. We need all of you, and we're excited that it's on the campus of Clark Atlanta University. I thank Melanie, I thank Getchell, I thank the board for the wise decision to bring this initiative to Clark Atlanta University. And yes, when I say Clark Atlanta University, I am so proud to be the president. Let me tell you, the Bible talks about first love also. So my first love was right there in Fairfield, Alabama at Miles College. So whenever I call Miles College's name, you know that's still also my heart. So my home people, you know I'm still right here with you, and I love you, okay? Michael Lomax.
Yes, sir.
What can this organization do in concert with your over 37 member institutions? How can we mobilize the United Negro College Fund to be in concert with the efforts of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation?
Yeah. Great question, and a challenging one, because I think it's going to take a different perspective on our campuses, as well as a different perspective in the communities that are proximate to our campuses. You know, I've been going on black college campuses. I first set foot on a black college campus in January of 1961 when I got off a Greyhound bus with my mother and my 5 brothers and sisters at the stop across from Tuskegee Institute in a little old gas station, which was not a black gas station, in Tuskegee, Alabama, and was greeted by Dr. Charles Good Gomillion, professor of sociology, who was there to receive us after a harsh journey across the Southland from Southern California to Tuskegee Institute, Alabama, where my mother, a journalist, was bringing her 6 children so she could write about the civil rights movement. Now, was she crazy? Slightly, yes, no doubt. Car broke down and we had to get on that Greyhound bus, and that was our freedom ride. And I tell you, when we got to Big Springs, Texas, and they said, you can't come into this waiting room and you can't eat at this lunch counter, we started to have our own sit-in. But when that Texas police officer showed up and said, it's either go into the colored section or get on that bus or go to jail, sanity finally, we got something to eat, and we got on that bus. But that was our harsh, that was, two things happened: harsh introduction to racial segregation, and then getting off that bus in Tuskegee and being met by a professor of sociology and taken over to Dorothy Hall, and for the next 2 weeks living on that campus and receiving the warm embrace of the Tuskegee Institute community taught me that black colleges serve a big role in the communities in which they're located. You know, Tuskegee was, in 1961, there was the citizens of Macon County, Tuskegee, were boycotting the downtown in Tuskegee because they wouldn't integrate. So you couldn't buy anything there. You had to go all the way over to Auburn or to Montgomery or to the black stores that were in Tuskegee. And there was a real, that boycott had been organized by the Tuskegee Civic Association, led by Dr. Gomillion, with the silent approval of the president of Tuskegee. But we were playing a role then. When the student movement occurred in Atlanta, the presidents of Atlanta University and Morehouse and Spelman and Clark and ITC and Morris Brown, they gave support to the students to engage in transforming community. Since then, we kind of have put up walls around our campuses. We have security. We don't let the community onto the campus, and we don't let the campus onto the community. So one of the things that has to change is our relationship to community. Now, I'm not saying we can't have safety and security. I taught at Spelman, and we had people coming on campus and going into dorms and assaulting young women. We can't have that. But we have to realize that that community on the other side of that wall is us. And so I think part of what we need is leadership from the campuses, Dr. French, and from the communities like the National Coalition, helping us understand, helping us redefine the relationship between and among our black colleges and the communities that surround them. You know, we're doing a lot of economic revitalization, but we're also doing a lot of neighborhood demolition. And we're seeing gentrification. Now, I want to know, where did all the poor black folks go? And what are we going to do to ensure that some of the benefits of transforming our neighborhoods are happening to the communities, the people who are already. So I think there's work to be done. I think we got to reorient ourselves and say that, you know, these institutions are of, by, and for the black community. That's going to take some different thinking, but we also have to engage the community about how we embrace and engage with institutions of higher education. And I think the most important thing that we can do, yes, we have to use the assets of the institutions, the educational assets, the research, to do the work that only they can do, and having think tanks on our campuses and do tanks on our campuses, because thinking without doing is just, you know, it doesn't. But I also think that we have to reconsider what it is we do as our core work. Our single most important work we do is that we educate the future generations. And historically black colleges have always had an open door to students who couldn't find an open door at predominantly white institutions. Now, that doesn't mean that we were taking lesser people. We were just taking people who were a little bit different. We just had a young woman here, Bernie King, has a new book, a new biography of her father out. And I started it this weekend, and it's very thick. It's very readable, though. But it begins by talking about Martin Luther King Sr., whose name was Michael, until he changed it to Martin. But he's born in Scottsboro. And he was born to sharecroppers. And when he decided to run off to Atlanta, he had a little bit of reading and a little bit of writing, but he didn't have much education. And before he could go to Morehouse, he went to some school where they put him in the 5th grade. And he was in his big strapping guy in his 20s. And you know what he did? He settled into that 5th grade chair until he got to the point where he could get in the house. And do you know what? John Hope, who was president of Morehouse and Atlanta University, Michael King, soon to be Martin Luther King Sr., often known as Daddy King, he failed that entrance exam 3 times getting into Morehouse. And I only think it was because his girlfriend, who was over at Spelman and the daughter of, a daughter of a pastor over there at Ebenezer, she helped him along. But by the time I got to Morehouse, Martin Luther King Sr. was on the board of trustees and was one of the most distinguished alums of Morehouse College. Where people begin their education journey does not define where they will end their lives. So, yes, we have to be getting the best and the brightest, but we cannot turn our backs on the unpolished diamonds who just need a little bit, now maybe like Daddy King may have needed a whole bunch of help to get it right. But look what happened. So I think the role of the camp, we have to reconsider what the role of the institutions are. And so one of the big proposals that we're making at UNCF is we want to have K through 12 schools either on our campuses or right next to our campuses. And we want the kids who go to those schools to come from the communities proximate to our campus, and we want them to prepare those young people to be students at our campus. Now, it took Martin Luther King, I don't know what, he was in his 20s before he started Morehouse. But by the next generation, his oldest son began Morehouse at the age of 15. And the genes were there. He could do it. The opportunity was there. He came to Morehouse and he flourished. I started Morehouse at 16. I don't claim to be a Martin Luther King, but I did pretty well. But my name is Michael. But I did, but I did pretty well. I think we have to. I think that what I would just. I give long answers, But I do think we have to think differently. We have to build new trust and new relationships between our black college campuses and our communities around them. Because the solution for our black colleges, enrollment growth, more students, that's right all around the campuses. You know, and how do we embrace those communities and bring their students into educational opportunity here? One other thing they had at Tuskegee when I was there in 1961, they had a school on the Tuskegee campus called Children's House. And if you were lucky, you could get into Children's House. You want to know about Children's House? You ask Lionel Richie about Children's House. And you could, and that was where they did their teacher training by teaching young people in the community and giving them an outstanding K through 12 education that prepared them to attend Tuskegee Institute or anywhere else that they wanted to go. Why don't we have those teacher training preparatory schools on our campuses? That could be a part of the solution. And then, you know, why aren't we doing economic development? And I know we're going to do that under your leadership, which is not just bringing rich folks to live in our communities, but bringing people with different economic backgrounds into our communities. Pretty soon, you know, look over from where we are today into downtown Atlanta. That's priced out of most folks. You come back on this side of Northside Drive, it's pretty soon going to be priced out. When we did that marching around this community in April of 1968, one of the streets we went down was Sunset in Vine City. On the other side of Hunter Street, now Martin Luther King, over by the Morris Brown Stadium. Who lived on Sunset? Who lived in the community? Martin Luther King Jr. So we marched quietly by his home. And then we went down to the state capitol and came back. You can't find anybody living over here anymore. We got to bring the community. If we don't, we're going to wake up one day and find out the folks living in our neighborhood don't look like our neighborhood. And they won't be going to CAU unless they convert it.
Thank you for that thorough answer, thorough history. I'm looking, and I heard a few things interestingly, a couple of the books that I'm reading now. You mentioned Reverend King being from Scottsboro, and my mind goes back to this concept we have called being woke now. But some of you all will remember the protest song of the Scottsboro Boys. In that song, it also spoke about being woke. What I'm suggesting is there is a similarity also, like you said, student movement running from Atlanta down through Birmingham, and the correlation of how we came to student movement. It has a lot to do. We understand what happened in 2014 in Ferguson. We know what happened with Michael Brown. We know what happened with Black Lives Matter after that. But what we have to make sure we focus on is what is the strategic direction and process for protesting. Give you an example, Deborah Scott, one of my graduates who's here, when the Howard University students started protesting about housing, and then that ran right down here to the AUC. Our students were prepared to protest, but Deborah asked the question, have you submitted any demands yet? Okay, let's go back to the time that President Lomax was speaking of. Most presidents at HBCUs had to remain silent and support in the back, including President Lucius Pitts at Miles College, including Clemens right here. And when the students from Morehouse came, like Lonnie King came over, and he was insistent that they were going to protest, he walked into the room and all of the presidents were there. Morris Brown, Spelman, Morehouse, Atlanta University, Clark, all of them were there. And they said, no, we don't want you going downtown to protest, because once you get arrested, you're not going to be able to do your homework, and then you'll flunk out of school, and you will have missed the mission. But President Clemens said, I'll tell you what I will do. If you all write up a list of demands, I'll come up with the money to run a full-page ad right here in Atlanta in the newspaper. And they came up with their demands, and right after that, Birmingham, the students at Miles College, they did the same thing. In this we believe. They had to come up with demands. And I say to the students, even in protest, it's fine to go out and protest in the street all weekend. But on Monday morning, if you have not gotten anything because of the protest, we have not won. We have attention, but we have not won anything because we didn't have demands. So I'm counting on this organization, Melanie, to be that organization. And again, I'm glad you chose in Clark Atlanta to sit with our students in the AU Center, to tell the history like Dr. Lomax just did, because it repeats itself. It repeats itself, and it's going to get stricter even in Georgia. And one of the things I'm making sure that the young people understand, that when that law in Georgia passed, that it becomes a felony to riot. And the question becomes, where is the distinction between protest and riot? We know what it is as academicians, but what are the police officers on the street going to say? Were you protesting? And if you were rioting, that is a felony now in Georgia. So we have to educate our students before we go out and protest whatever social justice issues that we are addressing. We need to make sure that our students are adequately informed, and that's why I need you all. That's why we need you all. And not just in Georgia, but in all of these states. Melanie, how much time do we have? Did she say no? Did she say none? Is that what you said?
Well, then we have fulfilled our promise.
5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay, I want to hear from Dr. Lomax. One more time. We've got 5 minutes. Let me see. UNCF has been masterful. Let me be clear. UNCF has been masterful in advocating for resources. I happen to serve now as the longest serving HBCU president in the nation. That means I've been here for a while, right? When I came, the UNCF, we were counting on maybe $1 million a year distribution to each school. Under President Lomax's leadership, we came up with a new model that included advocacy. And because of that model, many of our schools that would not have made it through COVID came out stronger than they went in, because of the financial resources that the UNCF was able to bring to the table, through the CARES Act, through HERF, by being on the Hill, by meeting with the secretary, by meeting with the president. I mean, millions of dollars. I mean, so I'm talking about, what am I saying? French, are you talking about money? Let me speak to Clark Atlanta University. Because of the UNCF, the COVID funds that came to Clark Atlanta University, that went to the university and directly to our students, was about $100 million. That's to this school, okay? Tuskegee, I heard some Tuskegee fans out there. Because of the UNCF, we had over $100 million, about $135 million alone forgiven at Tuskegee. Loan assistance, capital finance, forgiven. So the UNCF has made an impact like never in their history. So I'm wondering, Mr. President, since you've been so masterful, what do you anticipate that we can look for now that the COVID funds are gone, now that the George Floyd kind of giving from that community, now that that's gone, what can we expect for additional resources to support the missions of our schools?
That's a great question. So, you know, what do college presidents do? College presidents and presidents of UNCF, we raise money. And because just like if you were a politician, I know we have a couple of elected officials, they say money is the mother's milk of politics. Well, money is the mother's milk of colleges and universities. And so we were very successful, as Dr. French said, in our championing of federal financial support to black colleges beginning from 2020 through 2023. Over $6 billion of investment. That's unheard of in the amount of money. And just as it was $100 million in building debt that was forgiven for Tuskegee, it was $1.6 billion in building debt that was forgiven across all of HBCUs. So they, you know, that's like having a loan, your mortgage, you know, for your church. That's burning that church mortgage now.
Could I
Yeah,
add
go
to
ahead,
that?
go ahead.
Could I add to that? One institution I won't name, but very fortunate, they had consolidated all of their debt into the capital loan program. So when capital financing was forgiven for that institution, all of that debt was forgiven.
Yeah. Well, the Lord, there's nothing like luck and the Lord looking out for you, but you know, them days are over. And you saw what happened on this debt limit. They announced that we're not spending all that money. And you know, they didn't say it, but those Republicans, they said, too many black people, too many black colleges got that money. We're not gonna make sure they don't get any more. So what I would say is, I'm not looking to the federal government for a whole lot of new money. I'm looking to the private sector for a lot of support. And as Dr. French has not told you, but he is co-chairing, well, first of all, he's chairing his own, he got his own capital campaign. How much money you're raising, Dr. French? $250 million. He's raising $250 million for Clark Atlanta University. But what he also hadn't told you is he is chair of the member presidents of the 37 members of the United Negro College Fund. And he is co-chairing along with myself and with Milton Jones, who is the chair of our board, the $1 billion capital campaign for the United Negro College Fund. And we're not raising any money from the federal government. We don't take money from the, all that $1 billion we are raising from the private sector. And we have raised 43% of that $1 billion, $430 million. But you know, we think, we're not saying this yet, but it's not the right $1 billion. That's good. But what we really want is to raise money for endowments for black colleges. Because, you know, endowments are the gift that keep on giving. So we want to raise $750 million of that $1 billion has to be endowments. So we haven't raised but about 40 million of endowments. So we still got 700 more. You add 700 and 400 million. We got another, you know, we're going to raise over $1 billion in this campaign. That's the hard money. That's the smart money to raise, though. Because when you have that and you can't spend it and you can only spend a certain amount of it and it keeps growing, that's what art colleges and universities must have and need. You know, when I first came to Atlanta, Atlanta University had the largest endowment. It had about $20 million. And through some tough times, that money declined. The wealthiest black college at the time, I don't know, I think it was still Howard at the time. But back then, Spelman had about $14 million endowment. You watch out for those black women, man, I'm telling you. They got $500 million over there in endowment today. Well, excuse me, now we got to catch up. The brothers got to play some catch up. We got to catch up at CAU. We got to catch up at Morehouse, and at UNCF. We are committed and determined to being the first black institution to have a $1 billion endowment. No one has it yet. So that's what we got to do. So the name of the game of the future, and so you better treat me right, because we're going to have $1 billion. But it's really private fundraising. And I'm going to tell you, I will close with this. Education is critically important for the economic future of Black America. But I'm going to tell you, one of the things that we need to educate Black people on doing is raising and saving money and building assets. So that's the other piece of it. And, you know, we're pretty good at that at UNCF, so we're going to open a fundraising institute, and we believe that some of these civic organizations need to come and take some classes from us and learn how to raise some money. And we do charge a fee to teach you how to fish.
But
we might give you a special discount for the National Association.
Thank you.
Civic participation. Give Lomax a hand, everybody.
I was about to say, give Dr. Lomax a hand, everyone. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Melanie? Y'all gonna give French a hand?
That was a trick, first and foremost. Thank you, Dr. French. Thank you, Dr. Lomax. This was awesome. And I do expect that scholarship. Yeah, I want that scholarship to raise that money. I'm learning how important money is. Power of the buck. So can we give them another round of applause? And thank and Dr. French. I can't tell you cut off in your house, just so you know.
Oh,
that was a trick question.
I got it.